My name is Nia, and I'm 28 years old. For as long as I can remember, I dreamed of making it big in New York City, a place where ambition met opportunity. I moved here 5 years ago, fresh out of college, armed with a degree in marketing and a burning desire to prove myself. The city's energy fueled me, pushing me to work harder and reach higher. I landed a junior marketing position at Veridian Innovations, a seemingly progressive tech company known for its innovative products. It was a fast-paced environment, filled with bright minds and endless possibilities. I poured my heart into my work, eager to climb the corporate ladder and make a real impact in the industry. The initial months were exhilarating, a whirlwind of new projects and learning experiences. My team was diverse, reflecting the vibrant tapestry of New York itself, and I felt a sense of belonging. However, there was an undercurrent, a subtle chill that sometimes permeated the otherwise warm atmosphere. It often originated from the higher echelons of management, particularly from individuals like Mr. Harrison, a senior foreman on the product development floor. Mr. Harrison was a man in his late 50s, always impeccably dressed, with a stern demeanor and an air of traditional authority. He oversaw a significant portion of the company's manufacturing and design, a powerful figure whose influence extended beyond his department. His presence often brought a quiet tension, a sense that certain unspoken rules were always in play. I initially dismissed his reserved nature as professional distance, a common trait in high-ranking executives. He rarely interacted directly with junior staff like myself, but his gaze often lingered a moment too long, a silent assessment that felt unsettling. It was a feeling I couldn't quite articulate, a vague unease that I pushed to the back of my mind. Veridian Innovations prided itself on its modern image, its sleek offices, and its commitment to innovation. Yet, beneath the polished surface, there were whispers, hushed conversations about a corporate culture that valued conformity over individuality. I heard stories about employees being subtly pressured to fit in, to adhere to an unwritten code of appearance and behavior. I loved my job, the creative challenges, and the satisfaction of seeing my campaigns come to life. My work was recognized, and I felt I was on the right track, building a solid foundation for my career. I was determined to succeed, to break through any barriers, visible or invisible, that might stand in my way. My family, back in Georgia, had always instilled in me the importance of hard work and resilience. They taught me to be proud of my heritage, my identity, and to never let anyone diminish my worth. These lessons were a constant source of strength, a quiet anchor in the bustling, often overwhelming city. I often found myself reflecting on their words, especially when I encountered moments that hinted at a different reality than the one Veridian presented. There were small, almost imperceptible instances, like a colleague's surprised look when I spoke about my neighborhood, or an awkward silence after I mentioned a cultural event. These moments were fleeting, but they left a lingering impression. The corporate environment, despite its outward diversity, sometimes felt like a carefully curated stage where certain expressions of identity were more acceptable than others. I tried to navigate the space with grace, focusing on my performance and letting my work speak for itself. I believed that talent and dedication would ultimately overcome any unspoken biases. I was excited about an upcoming project, a major campaign for a new product launch that would significantly boost my profile within the company. It was a chance to truly shine, to demonstrate my capabilities on a larger scale. I spent weeks preparing, meticulously crafting every detail, eager to present my ideas. As the launch date approached, I decided to embrace a new look, one that felt authentic and empowering. I chose to style my hair in intricate braids, a protective style deeply rooted in my cultural heritage. It was a practical choice for the demanding work schedule, but also a personal statement of pride and self-expression. I walked into the office that Monday morning feeling confident and refreshed, ready to tackle the week's challenges. My braids felt like a crown, a tangible connection to my roots, and I carried myself with an extra spring in my step. I greeted my colleagues, some offering compliments, others barely noticing, as is typical in a busy office. However, as I passed Mr. Harrison's office, I noticed his gaze. It was sharper than usual, a look of distinct disapproval that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a fleeting moment, but it registered deeply, a silent warning that I couldn't ignore. The subtle chill I had felt before now seemed to intensify, a prelude to something more significant. The initial discomfort after Mr. Harrison's look quickly morphed into a persistent unease. It wasn't just his gaze. It was the way some colleagues suddenly seemed to avoid eye contact, or the polite but distant nods I received in the hallways. The once vibrant atmosphere around me felt subtly altered, as if a silent memo had been circulated. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was my imagination, a consequence of being overly sensitive. But the feeling persisted, a nagging sensation that something was amiss. I noticed that I was no longer included in casual coffee breaks or spontaneous lunch invitations with certain groups. My professional interactions remained cordial, but the warmth had dissipated. One afternoon, a colleague from another department, Sarah, approached me tentatively. She was usually quite friendly, but her demeanor was now guarded. She mentioned, almost in a whisper, that Mr. Harrison had made a comment in a team meeting about maintaining a professional image and adhering to company standards. Sarah quickly changed the subject, clearly uncomfortable, but her words confirmed my growing suspicions. The professional image comment felt like a direct, albeit veiled, reference to my new hairstyle. It was a tactic, a way to enforce conformity without explicitly stating the discriminatory intent. I began to observe Mr. Harrison more closely. He seemed to scrutinize my appearance whenever I was in his vicinity, his eyes lingering on my braids with an almost palpable disapproval. It was a silent form of intimidation, a constant reminder that I was being judged for something beyond my work performance. The pressure mounted, subtle at first, then increasingly overt. I received an email from HR, a generic reminder about the company's dress code and appearance policy. It was a standard template, but the timing felt anything but coincidental. It was another layer of the unspoken rules, designed to make me question my choices. I consulted the policy, reading every line carefully. There was nothing explicit about hairstyles, only vague language about neatness and professionalism. It was clear that the policy was being weaponized, interpreted in a way that targeted my specific cultural expression. This realization ignited a spark of defiance within me. My performance, however, remained impeccable. I continued to deliver high-quality work, meeting all my deadlines and exceeding expectations on my projects. I was determined not to let their subtle tactics affect my professional output. My work ethic was my shield, my dedication a testament to my commitment. Despite my efforts, the atmosphere grew colder. I was assigned to projects that felt less significant. My ideas were sometimes overlooked in meetings, and my contributions seemed to be minimized. It was a slow, insidious process designed to make me feel invisible, to erode my confidence. The major product launch campaign, which I had poured so much effort into, was suddenly reassigned to another team. The explanation was vague, citing strategic realignment, but I knew the real reason. My braids, my identity, had become an issue, a perceived deviation from their narrow definition of professionalism. A deep sense of injustice began to fester within me. I had worked tirelessly, sacrificed personal time, and dedicated myself to Veridian Innovations. To be sidelined, to be subtly penalized for simply being myself, was a betrayal of the values I thought the company upheld. I started documenting everything: the date of Mr. Harrison's initial look, Sarah's comment, the HR email, the reassignment of my project. I kept a detailed log, knowing that these seemingly small incidents were part of a larger, discriminatory pattern. This meticulous record-keeping became a quiet act of resistance. The competitive corporate environment I had once embraced now felt like a battleground. I realized that my talent and hard work alone were not enough. There was an invisible barrier, a glass ceiling reinforced by prejudice, that I was now directly confronting. This was not just about my job, it was about my dignity. I found solace in conversations with close friends outside of work, sharing my frustrations and fears. They listened with empathy, validating my feelings and encouraging me to stand firm. Their support was a lifeline, reminding me that I was not alone in this fight. The tension in the office became almost unbearable. Every interaction felt charged, every glance a judgment. I walked on eggshells, constantly aware of the scrutiny, yet refusing to yield. My braids remained, a silent symbol of my refusal to conform to their biased expectations. I knew a direct confrontation was inevitable. The subtle digs and silent treatments were merely a prelude. The company, or rather, certain individuals within it, were pushing me towards a breaking point. I braced myself, knowing that the fight for my dignity was about to escalate. The inevitable confrontation arrived on a Tuesday morning, a day that would forever be etched in my memory. I was called into Mr. Harrison's office, a sterile, imposing space that suddenly felt like a tribunal. His expression was grim, devoid of any warmth, as he motioned for me to sit. An HR representative, Miss Davies, sat beside him, her face impassive. Mr. Harrison began by stating that my appearance was no longer in line with company standards. He claimed that my braids were unprofessional and distracting, despite their neatness and the fact that they were a common, accepted hairstyle. His voice was cold, his words calculated, designed to strip me of my confidence. I calmly challenged his assertion, pointing out that my hairstyle was culturally significant and impeccably maintained. I asked him to specify which part of the company policy I had violated, knowing full well there was no such clause. He stammered, unable to provide a concrete answer, resorting to vague generalities about corporate image. Miss Davies then interjected, reading from a prepared statement about at-will employment and the company's right to terminate employment for any non-discriminatory reason. It was a chilling recitation, a legal shield designed to protect their discriminatory actions. Her tone was flat, devoid of empathy. Then came the words that shattered my professional world. "Nia, your employment with Veridian Innovations is terminated, effective immediately." The air left my lungs. Despite anticipating it, the finality of the statement hit me with a physical force. I was being fired, not for my performance, but for my hair, for my identity. A wave of disbelief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of righteous anger. I looked at Mr. Harrison, then at Miss Davies, their faces betraying no emotion. It was clear this decision had been made long ago, a calculated move to remove what they perceived as an unwelcome deviation from their narrow norms. I stood up, my voice trembling slightly but firm. "This is discrimination," I stated, my gaze unwavering. "You are firing me because of my braids, because of my race. This is unjust and illegal." Mr. Harrison scoffed, dismissing my accusation with a wave of his hand, as if my words were inconsequential. They handed me a severance package document, a paltry sum designed to silence me and make me disappear quietly. They expected me to sign it, to accept their terms and walk away without a fight. But in that moment, looking at their dismissive faces, I knew I couldn't. I refused to be a statistic, another victim of corporate prejudice. I walked out of that office with my head held high, but my heart was a tangled mess of emotions. The shame of being fired, the anger at the injustice, and the fear of an uncertain future all swirled within me. My corporate dream had just been abruptly, brutally ended. The walk to my desk to gather my personal belongings felt like a walk of shame. Colleagues avoided my gaze, some offering pitying glances, others simply pretending not to notice. The silence was deafening, a testament to the fear that permeated the office, the fear of speaking out against injustice. As I packed my box, I thought of my family, of the sacrifices they had made for me to pursue my dreams in the city. How would I tell them? How would I explain that my career had been derailed by something as arbitrary and prejudiced as my hairstyle? The weight of their expectations, and my own, felt crushing. The financial implications immediately loomed large. Rent in New York City was unforgiving, and my savings, while modest, wouldn't last long without a steady income. The fear of financial instability, of losing everything I had worked for, was a cold, hard reality. But beneath the fear, a resolve began to harden. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every person who had ever faced discrimination in the workplace, every individual whose identity had been deemed unprofessional. I knew I had to fight, not just for myself, but for a principle. I left Veridian Innovations that day with a box of personal items and a burning sense of injustice. The polished facade of the company now seemed like a cruel joke, masking a deep-seated prejudice. My termination was not an ending, it was a catalyst, a spark that would ignite a much larger fire. I immediately called my closest friends, pouring out the story, my voice thick with emotion. Their outrage mirrored my own, and their unwavering support provided the first glimmers of hope. They reminded me that my worth was not defined by a prejudiced company. The journey ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and uncertainties. But I was no longer just Nia, the marketing professional. I was Nia, the woman who had been wronged, and who was now determined to seek justice, not just for herself, but for countless others. The days following my termination were a blur of raw emotion and overwhelming uncertainty. I spent hours replaying the conversation in Mr. Harrison's office, dissecting every word, every dismissive glance. The injustice felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The shame of being fired, coupled with the anger of blatant discrimination, was a potent, debilitating cocktail. My small apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The vibrant energy of New York City, which I had always found so invigorating, now seemed to mock my stagnant situation. I struggled with feelings of isolation, wondering how I would navigate the sudden, unexpected turn in my life. The financial worries were relentless. I meticulously reviewed my meager savings, calculating how long I could survive without an income. The fear of not being able to pay rent, of having to leave the city I loved, was a constant, gnawing anxiety. It was a stark reminder of the precariousness of financial independence. I tried to apply for other jobs, but the thought of explaining the circumstances of my termination filled me with dread. Would potential employers see me as a troublemaker? Would my story be believed? The corporate world suddenly seemed like a hostile, unforgiving place, riddled with invisible barriers. My self-worth took a significant hit. Despite knowing I had done nothing wrong, the act of being fired, especially for such a personal reason, chipped away at my confidence. I questioned my choices, my appearance, even my decision to move to New York. It was a dark period of introspection and self-doubt. My friends, however, refused to let me wallow. They visited, called constantly, and offered unwavering emotional support. They cooked meals, helped me research legal options, and reminded me of my strength and resilience. Their belief in me was a crucial anchor in my storm of despair. One evening, my friend Aisha, a community organizer, sat with me for hours. She listened patiently as I recounted the entire ordeal, her eyes reflecting my anger and frustration. She gently reminded me that my experience was not unique, that countless individuals faced similar discrimination, often in silence. "Your story has power, Nia," she told me, her voice calm but firm. "It's not just about you. It's about a systemic issue that needs to be brought into the light." Her words resonated deeply, shifting my perspective from personal grievance to a broader fight for justice. Aisha connected me with a nonprofit legal aid organization specializing in workplace discrimination. Meeting with their attorneys was a turning point. They listened to my detailed account, reviewed my documentation, and confirmed that I had a strong case for racial discrimination. The legal process, they explained, would be long and arduous, but they were committed to fighting alongside me. This conversation instilled a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer just a victim. I was a claimant, an individual seeking accountability. I also started attending support groups for individuals who had experienced workplace discrimination. Hearing their stories, sharing my own, and realizing the common threads of injustice was incredibly validating. It transformed my isolation into a sense of collective struggle and shared resilience. The anger I had felt began to transform into a focused determination. I realized that simply seeking personal compensation was not enough. I wanted to expose Veridian Innovations, to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate because of their identity. I started researching Veridian's public image, their diversity statements, and their corporate social responsibility initiatives. The hypocrisy was glaring. They projected an image of inclusivity while practicing covert discrimination. This fueled my resolve even further. My voice, which had felt silenced and small, began to grow stronger. I practiced articulating my story, rehearsing the facts, and refining my message. I knew that if I was going to fight, I needed to be clear, concise, and compelling. The fear of the unknown was still present, but it was now overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. I understood that this battle was bigger than just my job. It was about challenging deeply ingrained prejudices and holding powerful corporations accountable. I made a conscious decision to transform my pain into purpose. This experience, as devastating as it was, would not break me. Instead, it would be the catalyst for meaningful change, a testament to the power of standing up for what is right. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began to actively plan my fight against Veridian Innovations. The legal route was important, but I knew that public pressure could be an even more powerful tool. My goal was not just to win a lawsuit, but to expose the company's hypocrisy and force a real cultural shift. My friend Aisha became my strategic partner, her expertise in community organizing invaluable. We spent hours brainstorming, mapping out potential allies, and identifying the most effective ways to amplify my story. We knew that a single voice, no matter how loud, could be easily dismissed, but a chorus could not be ignored. Our first step was to craft a clear and concise narrative of my experience. We focused on the facts: my excellent work record, the discriminatory reason for my firing, and the blatant disregard for my cultural identity. We wanted to ensure that the message was undeniable and resonated with a broad audience. We reached out to local community leaders and social justice organizations known for their advocacy against racial discrimination. Many were immediately receptive, recognizing the systemic nature of my case and its potential to highlight broader issues. Their support provided crucial legitimacy and reach. We also connected with local media outlets, particularly those with a history of covering social justice issues. We prepared a press release outlining my story and calling attention to Veridian Innovations' discriminatory practices. We understood the power of media in shaping public opinion. Social media became a key component of our strategy. We created a campaign, using a compelling hashtag that encapsulated my experience and called for solidarity. We shared my story, encouraging others to share their own experiences of workplace discrimination, creating a digital echo chamber of support. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Stories poured in from individuals who had faced similar prejudices, validating my experience and fueling my resolve. The online community rallied, offering words of encouragement, sharing my posts, and demanding action. We planned a protest outside Veridian Innovations' corporate headquarters. It was a strategic decision to bring the issue directly to their doorstep to ensure that their employees, their clients, and the general public could not ignore the injustice. We wanted to make a visible statement. Organizing the protest was a monumental task. We coordinated with community groups, secured permits, and mobilized volunteers. We designed signs with powerful messages, emphasizing my hair, my identity, my rights, and justice for Nia. Every detail was meticulously planned to maximize impact. I spent hours practicing my speech, knowing that this would be my first public address. I wanted my words to be clear, impactful, and to convey the depth of my pain and my unwavering commitment to justice. It was an opportunity to reclaim my narrative and speak truth to power. The fear of public exposure, of facing my former employer head-on, was immense. But the collective support, the stories of others, and the burning desire for accountability outweighed my apprehension. I knew I was not just fighting for myself, but for a larger cause. We leveraged every connection, every resource available to us. We printed flyers, distributed information in local neighborhoods, and spread the word through grassroots networks. The energy was palpable, a growing wave of solidarity building towards the day of the protest. I felt a profound shift within me. The despair and isolation had been replaced by a sense of empowerment and collective strength. I was no longer just a victim. I was an advocate, a voice for change, standing on the shoulders of those who had fought before me. The day of the protest loomed, a significant milestone in my journey. I knew it would be challenging, but I was ready. The spark of injustice had ignited a fire, and I was determined to ensure that its flames would illuminate the path to true equality. The morning of the protest dawned cold and gray, but the atmosphere was charged with an electric energy. I arrived at Veridian Innovations headquarters to find a crowd already gathering, a sea of determined faces holding signs and banners. My heart swelled with a mixture of nerves and profound gratitude. Community leaders, activists, and concerned citizens stood alongside my friends and family, their presence a powerful testament to collective solidarity. The chants began, rhythmic and strong, echoing through the concrete canyons of the city. My hair, my rights. Veridian, do what's right. I stood before the crowd, clutching the microphone, my voice initially trembling as I began to speak. But as I recounted my story, the words flowed with a newfound power, fueled by the injustice I had endured and the support surrounding me. I spoke of dignity, identity, and the insidious nature of workplace discrimination. The crowd listened intently, their faces reflecting a shared understanding and outrage. When I finished, a roar erupted, a powerful affirmation that my story resonated deeply. It was a moment of profound connection, a realization that my personal battle had become a collective movement. Local news vans lined the street, cameras flashing, microphones extended. My story, once confined to hushed conversations, was now being broadcast to a wider audience. Journalists interviewed me, my allies, and other protesters, eager to capture the essence of this unfolding drama. Veridian Innovations, caught off guard by the scale of the protest, initially tried to ignore it. Security guards stood by, impassive, while employees peered from behind tinted windows. But the sheer volume of the chants and the persistent media presence made it impossible to dismiss. The protest continued throughout the day, drawing more people as word spread through social media and news reports. The hashtag we created trended, sparking conversations and debates across various platforms. My story became a focal point for discussions about workplace equity and racial bias. The company issued a brief, generic statement claiming to be an inclusive employer and denying any discriminatory practices. It was a predictable response, designed to deflect criticism, but it only served to further inflame public opinion. Their words rang hollow against the backdrop of our protest. That evening, my story was featured prominently on local news channels and in online publications. The images of the protest, the passionate chants, and my emotional testimony resonated with viewers. The narrative of a young, talented woman unjustly fired for her hair captivated the public. The media coverage was a double-edged sword. While it amplified my message, it also brought unwanted scrutiny and criticism. There were online trolls and anonymous comments dismissing my claims or attempting to discredit me. But for every negative voice, there were dozens more offering support and encouragement. My legal team, observing the public outcry, felt emboldened. The protest had significantly strengthened our position, demonstrating the widespread support for my case. It put pressure on Veridian to take our legal demands seriously, knowing that public opinion was now firmly on our side. The protest had achieved its immediate goal. It had forced Veridian Innovations into the spotlight, exposing their hidden prejudices. It was no longer just a private legal dispute. It was a public reckoning, a challenge to their carefully constructed corporate image. I felt exhausted but exhilarated. The day had been emotionally draining, but it had also been incredibly empowering. I had found my voice, and the streets of New York had roared with me, demanding justice. This was just the beginning, but it was a powerful start. The tension remained high, a palpable sense of anticipation for Veridian's next move. They could no longer hide behind corporate platitudes. The world was watching, and the pressure was mounting for them to address the injustice they had inflicted. The impact of the protest was immediate and far-reaching. Within days, the hashtag we created went viral, becoming a rallying cry for justice. Public outrage swelled, fueled by my story and the growing number of individuals sharing their own experiences of workplace discrimination under the same hashtag. Calls for a boycott of Veridian Innovations began to emerge organically across social media platforms. Influencers, community groups, and even some smaller businesses joined the chorus, urging consumers to stop buying Veridian products. The message was clear: no justice, no business. The boycott gained momentum with astonishing speed. Retailers reported a noticeable drop in sales of Veridian products, and online reviews plummeted. The company's stock price began to dip, sending shockwaves through their executive suites. The public's collective power was beginning to make itself felt. Major news outlets, initially focused on the local protest, now picked up the story, elevating it to a national conversation. My face, my braids, and my story became symbols of the broader fight against racial discrimination in corporate America. Veridian Innovations was facing a full-blown public relations crisis. Internally, panic set in at Veridian. I heard through former colleagues that there were emergency meetings, frantic attempts to control the narrative, and desperate efforts to understand the extent of the damage. Mr. Harrison, I learned, was facing intense scrutiny from higher management. The company's initial dismissive statement now seemed laughably inadequate. They tried to issue a more conciliatory message, expressing regret for any misunderstanding and reiterating their commitment to diversity and inclusion. But it was too little, too late. The public saw through their hollow words. The legal pressure also intensified. My attorneys, armed with the overwhelming public support, pushed harder for a swift and equitable resolution. Veridian's lawyers, once arrogant and dismissive, now seemed more willing to negotiate, recognizing the severe financial and reputational risks they faced. The boycott continued to tighten its grip. Major corporate partners began to express concerns about their association with Veridian, fearing that the negative publicity would tarnish their own brands. Some even threatened to pull their contracts, a move that would be catastrophic for the company. I received messages of support from unexpected places, other victims of corporate discrimination, employees from other companies who admired my courage, and even some former Veridian staff who had quietly endured similar prejudices. Their solidarity fueled my determination. The tension was palpable, a waiting game as we watched Veridian Innovations crumble under the weight of public condemnation. The company that had once seemed invincible, protected by its corporate facade, was now vulnerable, exposed by its own discriminatory practices. There were moments of doubt, of course. The constant media attention was exhausting, and the online negativity could be draining. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I remembered why I started this fight, not just for myself, but for a more just and equitable workplace for everyone. The boycott was not just about sales, it was about reputation, trust, and moral standing. Veridian had lost the trust of its consumers, and regaining it would be an uphill battle, if at all possible. Their brand, once synonymous with innovation, was now tainted by discrimination. The collective power of ordinary people, amplified by social media and traditional news, proved to be an unstoppable force. It was a testament to the fact that even the largest corporations could be held accountable when people united for a common cause. The final chapter of the struggle was approaching. Veridian Innovations was cornered, their options dwindling. They had underestimated the power of one woman's story and the collective outrage it could ignite. The tide had turned, and justice was finally within reach. The pressure on Veridian Innovations became unbearable. Facing plummeting sales, a collapsing stock price, and the threat of major corporate partners withdrawing, they had no choice but to capitulate. My legal team received an urgent call. Veridian wanted to settle, and they wanted to do it quickly and publicly. The terms were unprecedented. Veridian agreed to a substantial financial settlement, acknowledging their discriminatory actions. More importantly, they committed to a comprehensive overhaul of their HR policies, including explicit protections for natural hairstyles and mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, especially management. Mr. Harrison was quietly removed from his position, a silent but significant victory. Veridian also agreed to fund a new initiative dedicated to promoting workplace equity with my input on its structure and mission. This was more than just a personal win, it was a systemic change. The press conference announcing the settlement was surreal. I stood beside my attorneys, no longer a victim, but a catalyst for change. I spoke calmly, powerfully, about the importance of identity, dignity, and the need for corporations to truly embody the values they claim to uphold. The media coverage was overwhelmingly positive, portraying the outcome as a triumph for civil rights and a testament to the power of collective action. Veridian Innovations, humbled and chastened, issued a public apology, a stark contrast to their earlier dismissive statements. The boycott was officially called off, but the impact on Veridian's brand was lasting. It served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder to other corporations that diversity and inclusion were not just buzzwords, but fundamental principles that demanded genuine commitment. My life, of course, was irrevocably changed. The financial settlement provided me with security, but the true wealth was the platform I had gained. I became a sought-after speaker, sharing my story at conferences, universities, and corporate events, advocating for workplace equity. I used a portion of the settlement to establish the Braids Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal aid and advocacy for individuals facing workplace discrimination based on race, gender, or appearance. It became my life's new purpose, transforming my pain into a force for good. I reconnected with my passion for marketing, but on my own terms. I started a consulting firm, specializing in helping companies build truly inclusive brands and develop equitable workplace cultures. My experience gave me unique insights, allowing me to guide businesses towards authentic diversity. The relationships I forged during the protest, particularly with Aisha and the legal team, deepened into lifelong bonds. We continued to collaborate, fighting for justice on various fronts, united by our shared commitment to a more equitable society. I often reflect on that cold Tuesday morning when I was fired. It felt like an ending, a devastating blow to my dreams. But it was, in fact, a powerful beginning, a catalyst that propelled me towards a purpose far greater than I could have ever imagined. My braids, once a source of contention, became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of standing firm in one's identity. They were no longer just a hairstyle. They were a crown of defiance and a beacon of hope. The journey was arduous, filled with moments of despair and uncertainty. But the triumph was not just in winning the case, it was in reclaiming my narrative, inspiring others, and contributing to a more just world. It proved that one voice, when amplified, can indeed move mountains. I continue to advocate, to speak out, and to work towards a future where no one is discriminated against for simply being themselves. My story is a reminder that while the fight for equality is ongoing, every act of resistance, every voice raised, brings us closer to true liberation. My corporate dream, though shattered in one form, was rebuilt into something far more meaningful and impactful. It was a journey from personal injustice to public triumph, leaving a lasting legacy of change.